Um, Quickly, you're trying to replace 3 texts, Spanish 3, poetry, and FST.
Correct.
Yet, again, reading this as well, but you're only increasing your books and periodicals by $4,600.
Well, part of it is, I mean, we did not go through years and years of squeezed textbook purchases in the past, so that we start off with a higher baseline than the middle school has. So part of it is shifting some money from one department to another, and part of it is a total net increase as well, David. So that's why it doesn't look quite as large. That difference is certainly not going to pay for all those texts. We're doing some shifting within
Okay.
departments.
Then I was wondering how you managed to get that
would be
kind of
quite
price.
a bargain.
I have another question. It interrelates 3 things that I think is important for the public to understand. This period of intervention that you're talking about is, I think, somewhat connected to the 3 school-wide assessments where you're trying to assess people's reading, writing, and research skills. I thought you mentioned that you're trying to identify people coming in, where their weakness is, and then through the period of intervention, Achievement Center, and at least right now, math teachers, address whether they're B students, A students, C students, D students, address their shortfall. Do I have this essentially correct?
You got it exactly correct.
I think people should understand that right now this is being done in combination with the Achievement Center, but the math department has stepped up and are contributing 1 free period that they normally would have had a week to be able to do this, and they're doing it for no additional money. Is that correct?
That's right.
What about the other departments, like the English department? Or
The English department, the need was not quite the same because you might remember that historically, since the inception of the Achievement Center, there has been a full-time English teacher in the Achievement Center. We did, coming into this year, actually, instead of having Lisa Melanson, who was here earlier, in the Achievement Center all day, what we have done is we've shifted so that Lisa is actually teaching 2 classes this year, and some of the other English teachers are stepping in to fill some of the periods when Lisa has in the past. And they're being relieved of one of the classes that they would have otherwise taught. So we are continuing, when it comes to English, to have a full-time presence in the Achievement Center, which has always been very beneficial. We're doing it in a slightly different way, David. So it doesn't reflect as a cost increase anyway.
Okay, what I'm actually trying to do is highlight for the public that this, what I think is a great program of catching everybody, whether A students or D students, and improving them, and we're doing it at least in math for free.
Yeah, I mean, what happened in the beginning of the year, to make that very real, is that the math department did administer a common assessment to every single kid in math. And then they established benchmarks for students, places where, and they identified, okay, this student is weak on solving quadratic equations, or this student is weak on calculating the area of circles. So they identified very specifically what the students' weaknesses were, and then they required the students to go to the Achievement Center to get assistance. And there were kids from AP to our most challenging level classes, to our remedial classes, and everything in between, who were just swamping the Achievement Center for the first 2 months of the year, getting assistance with those areas. And in the past, we have not been able to be, partially that we've administered the assessments this time for the first time, and partially is that access is available in the Achievement Center to be able to catch all kids. Some of them loved it, some of them hated it, but I think all of them got through ultimately.
If I may continue, you're also doing assessments on reading, writing, and research.
Yes.
When you find defects or deficiencies, I should say, how do you address that?
Yeah, those have been more curricular and instructional changes. For example, our social studies and English departments have been spending a significant amount of time recently looking at the research assessments, finding out where our students in general are strong and weak, and then figuring out, okay, where do we need to plug these things in? Because honestly, that's an area where we have been less systematic than we should have been. So it's not necessarily a matter of, okay, we have to remediate a particular student in a particular area. It's we have to make sure that all kids are being hit on these core research skills. And the same thing is happening in connection with the reading assessments as well. It has been a long process, I will say, and I have promised parents a couple of times, and too early, that the results of those assessments will be on the portal. We're very close to being able to do that. There's been a learning curve for us to figure out how do we go about fairly establishing benchmarks and
Is that more reliable than a check is in the mail? Or?
Yes. It will happen.
Do you have any plans to expand this beyond those three core, reading, writing, research, and math?
At this point, we do not have any plans for that. Not to say we won't, but those are the areas at this point.
Okay, and just to make it a little, I'll be redundant, but it's called, there's a psychological term for it. But it's, the key to all this is we're improving all levels of kids through use of achievement center, through use of teachers voluntarily giving up a free period. All of this is being done at no cost.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I think this question is for you, Jeff. The superintendent's narrative has a reduction of 1.5 teaching positions. I know there's a decline in enrollment at Pond Cove, and one of those positions is at Pond Cove. But I couldn't find the other half of position. Is that in the high school?
Not to my knowledge.
That's at Pond Cove also. We used we used some federal stimulus money for half a reading teacher last year.
Right.
So that the 1.5 positions are coming out of Pond Cove.
Federal funding again that we're using disappeared.
Okay, so the federal funding has disappeared and the half a reading teacher is
Right. The
disappeared.
was enrollment driven. I didn't mention this before, but we have 7 fourth grades this year. We'll have 6 next year. And the other half is because through instructional support funds, we had added a half-time teacher who concentrated on kindergarten.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
How is the reading, how is that teaching in the reading world? How do you support that?
We have to basically live with it and take what we have and redistribute it. What we try to do is what Jeff is doing, and I think, our benchmarks are a little more finely grained there. So when the budget is passed, we'll see what we have for reading support to do that. I'm convinced that our work with Danny and Claire through K-5 task force will help with that. So it won't be quotas for each grade. We'll have the data and the information to show where the needs are. We did that this year. Beginning of grade 2, we had a collection of kids who were not reached the benchmark, but they got more attention than they would have before. And I think 80% of them are now on benchmark.
Any other questions for Jeff Forto? Okay, who's next? Instructional support?
Instructional support this year. First, I just want to thank Gary and all his crew for Google Docs and Google websites, and the whole thing has really helped all the teachers and staff, all staff members, and including my first highlight was the survey, the instruction support survey that Gary helped me create, which goes out with, and everything in our office here at central office goes out to parents. It goes electronically, where we save money on mail and stamps, but there's a survey that goes out to parents that just had an IEP meeting, and so the data that came in as of when I wrote this was basically we have a 90% satisfaction rate, and there's certain questions in that, and I can certainly show you guys that. It's very good data, so we're making our customers raving fans for instructional support, so I thought that was great. A lot of the ARA funds that we keep talking about that have disappeared for instructional support or special education, we really used those to really ramp up our curriculum for the last couple of years. Assessment, programming, research-based methodology, the interventions that has worked seamlessly with that half-time position that you were just talking about with Suzanne at Pond Cove, all the way up into the high school and the middle school. We spent a lot of time, we've had a lot of new regulations, special ed regulations, main care regulations, 504 new regulations that we've had to do a lot of professional development on. Main care is actually a highlight for us. As Ken was talking about, we have $400,000 roughly in reserves from last year, and that was the main care rules from last year, and it was a bundled rate, which was great. Now it's unbundled with the new regulations. I'm not even going to get into it. It's very technical, but I really have to thank our staff for diving into these new regulations and starting with our technology to bill for main care, for students with main care. And as of February 1st, the numbers have gone up because we actually have more money. I think we're closer to 75, maybe, close to 80,000. Most of the school districts around the state have received no money at all because it's so complicated, and we really chase this money because we know how important it is for budget time. But at that time, there was only $60,000 for all the state of Maine, for all the schools that were brought in. 40,000 was brought in by Cape Elizabeth. That number's probably gone up. I haven't checked with that. But last year, schools around Maine pulled in $25 million. So you can see that there's not a lot of money going to school systems, and most school systems budget zero. So what we're estimating about, I'd like to see 125,000, which is what, doing this right, we can bring in this year. The last highlight is the high incident population, and again, every year I talk about this. In Table 3, you can really see, since I started 5 years ago, autism rate has doubled, the multiple disabilities area has doubled, and our special education population has stayed roughly the same. If you look at some of the Table 1, where it's basically 180 students, but out of those 180 students, they're not really low incidence, which is really typical learning disabilities or speech language kids. These kids that are more high incidence, so they have more one-on-ones, they have more needs, they have more direct instruction, which we use the ARA funds for the last couple of years to offset these increased costs, which I'm going to get into with the budget. Review of budget history. Just last year, we tried to stay at a zero base. We actually reduced last year 2 ed techs. But with move-ins, and as John, I remember what John said last year, I think. It's actually a good thing when we have a lot of move-ins coming into Cape Elizabeth. It shows that we're a good school system. But we do have a significant amount of move-ins. I have a new student coming in from California with Asperger's with a one-on-one. So that's coming in at the end of the month. So we're going to, move the furniture type of stuff and with staff. So we're going to work with that. But we had to add in, what's important about it, we had to add in because of Child Development Services, CDS, the incoming kindergartens. Some parents moved into the district with some high incident kids, and we had to put a couple ed techs back into the budget. So we're going to stay at 34 this year in this proposed budget. Last year we had an out-of-district placement for a student that's been with us for a long time. I can't really go into the details, but this year we had a couple students at the high school that we needed to outplace, and that was another $72,000. The ARA funds that we used that I talked about was for the last couple of years. That was that half a literacy RTI person that you guys were talking about, and in all the work, another huge highlight is the literacy committee. I know Tom talked about that before. That's really helped work seamlessly with both regular ed and special ed. And so that last installment of ARA funds is complete as of this year. And we have to spend it by September, correct, Ellen? Yes. Or we lose it. So proposed summary budget for next year. So based on those high-incident kids that have moved in, we had to increase the budget of the last couple of years. That $140,000 needs to be moved back, which includes staffing and contract services. In addition, we will still receive the federal IDA local entitlement monies. These are historically coming in. That's about $363,000. We have to continually shuffle that, and that is also linked to main care because we can't use staff that are billing main care. We can't double dip. So Pauline and I are constantly moving around staff to make sure that we're not using staff that also bill for main care. And our out-of-district costs budget will be about $110,000 for 2 students. One of the students will be exiting and graduating this year. That is currently in this year's budget. So as you can see, that we're going to keep the same amount of staff in Table 1. And in addition, those are our related services.